Hello again, Lit Writing. I wanted just to record one more little screencast to wrap up the year and say goodbye to you guys, and to just do a quick little recap of all the journeys we've had together through literature this year. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in. And first thing I have for you guys here is a little quote from Harper Lee, probably my favorite author of all the ones we've read this year, author of To Kill a Mockingbird. And I'll just give you a second to read that and just let that idea sink in as we get into this. So I'm going to start us back at the beginning of the year when we did our short story boot camp to kind of get started as a literature class together. We talked about story structure, and again, like I mentioned to you guys at the beginning of the year, the thing that I think is really cool about the story structure, the Freytag's pyramid structure, is that pretty much any piece of storytelling follows this structure, whether it's a TV series, whether it's a movie or a short story or a novel or a play. You can kind of figure out where you're going in the story based on thinking about the structure in the back of your head. We also talked about finding a theme, which would be the author's message in a piece of text. And remember that a theme is not just one word. It's not just like love or war. It's something deeper, like the power of empathy and how it can help people become more understanding members of society. Right? It's kind of a phrase or a sentence because it's a big idea. Right? It's what a human being was trying to communicate through their work. And we also started talking about and reviewing our literary devices. A lot of you came in with some expertise of your own from middle school, already knowing what things like metaphors were, or being able to apply that to a text. But we started sharpening those up again through our short story unit. After that, we introduced each other to John Steinbeck, and we started reading Mice and Men. We started to really ramp up our close reading, and we did our first timed writings through, you did your first solo timed writing, that is, with of Mice and Men, and looking at the words of John Steinbeck. We talked about the plight of the migrant worker, so why some people had really much more difficult lives during that time period with the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, and how that affected their lives from day to day. And we saw George and Lenny's struggles and how the things that happened to them, why the things that happened to them happened because of what was going on in society at that time. Right? And this was also the beginning of our conversation on empathy, which has kind of come full circle, and that's where we're ending our year, talking about if people had been more understanding of people like George and Lenny, if they had just taken the time to think about why are these guys the way that they are? Why do they care about each other? What's really going on with Lenny? Things could have gone a lot better for them, right? And we moved into To Kill a Mockingbird. And we talked, of course, about racism, prejudice, and we further our explorations into the idea of empathy. We talked about the quote that Atticus delivers pretty early on in the novel that hits pretty hard as the story goes on, this idea of walking around in someone else's skin. If the people of that prejudice and hate-filled Southern society could have just put themselves into the point of view of what it was like to be black, what it was like to be poor, they may have been able to understand why it's not okay to live your life with hatred and with greed, right? And maybe somebody like Bob Ewell, if he was able to show empathy, things would have been a lot different. It's kind of the theme of literature in general, right? If somebody had been able to think things through, look at things a little differently, things would have gone a lot different for the victims or the unfortunate characters. We talked about what is true courage. You guys did a pretty amazing job of the timed writing on that topic, and I really enjoyed reading those, hearing you define and examine what is courage. It's not just what we think it is, right? What Atticus said to his kids, it's not a man with a gun in his hand, right? We talked about why do we fight for change, and this is going to hit really hard right now if you've been following the news and you know what's going on in our country. Why do we fight for change in a society where change might be impossible, right? Just because it seems like we're living through dark times and things aren't going very well. Do we keep fighting? Do we stand up for what we believe in, right? Of course the answer is yes, and Atticus Finch taught us that, right? Then we moved into the Odyssey for our second semester, the beginning of semester 2. And you guys did a collaborative group project where you researched a god or goddess. And there was a bigger purpose to that, of course, than just learning about that god or goddess. That was to get you guys working together to learn about compromise and to work with people you might not have otherwise worked with. The groups were randomly assigned. And much like Odysseus and his crew had to work together to overcome their challenges, you guys might have had to work together with each other to overcome some challenges in trying to get a good grade on that project, right? And hopefully that went well for you. From the reflections you guys did, it seemed like you learned something from collaborating with one another. But please continue to think about that as you move through your next couple years of literature, of school in general, because collaborating is going to be a huge part of it. especially and moving into the workforce as well. You guys learned about the Greek gods and goddesses and their place in literature. Obviously, as you continue reading, you're going to keep hearing about those. Authors are going to make allusions and references to Zeus and Athena and Aphrodite, so just learning the basics about those goes a long way. You'll get those little bits of background knowledge in the poetry you read in the next few years, and you'll hopefully remember, oh yeah, I learned that in freshman lit. I remember the group that presented on Artemis, right? And then, of course, we did the hero's journey. We watched Toy Story as a fun little intro to that and tried to track the arc of the hero, try to figure out who the hero was, and then, of course, talked about what does it mean to be a hero, right? It's not just always pulling out your sword and being ready to fight the dragon. It's sometimes making difficult decisions, sacrificing for the greater good, right? And Odysseus learned that, and he's the only one who got home at the end of that long journey. And then, of course, when we had our time together interrupted, we were finishing up Romeo and Juliet. We learned about Shakespeare and the art of reading versus seeing. I think I hopefully said to you guys enough times, remember that Shakespeare and all plays in general are not meant to be read. They're meant to be seen. But we can open up the book and we can look at the text because it's beautiful, of course. But the art of seeing that performed and watching the movie adaptations, and maybe someday you'll get a chance to see a Shakespeare play on stage, is a powerful experience. We debated young love and the pros and cons. We had a great Socratic seminar on that. And then you guys ended that unit by talking about who is to blame. Right? Your essays were mostly, you had some other options as well, but mostly who is to blame for something like that when a tragedy happens. The flaws of things like feuds and hatreds, right? And then from afar, we learned together about science fiction in our sci-fi mini unit. We talked about the purpose of sci-fi. The whole idea of authors exploring science fiction is to answer the question, what if? To look at the future and hope and wonder what it's going to be like. The difference between a utopia, a perfect world, and a dystopia, a world that is gone really the wrong way, and how sci-fi can predict mistakes we might make in the future. That was another big purpose of science fiction. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the text that I found for you, and the short film, as well as the package from the nonfiction reading that I had you guys take a look at. So before we conclude, and as I say goodbye to you guys, just some parting thoughts. I want you to really take this idea of empathy. It's why I ended the year with this. If we had been together, we would have done a Socratic seminar on empathy, and it's always a really powerful experience. So I want you guys to just think about empathy and continue to apply it to your lives. It's not just a literary theme. It really is something that should come up in your lives on a daily basis. And try to apply it to your lives. Try to hear Atticus's voice in the back of your head and try to step into somebody else's shoes when you're trying to make decisions, important decisions in your life. And again, as you're watching the events in the news unfold and potentially hearing sirens outside your bedroom windows at night this week, think about social justice and activism. And I'm not going to tell you how to think or how to believe or what to do at this time in history, but think about what you want to do and try to find your voice, because you have a lot of power as young people, and I'm really looking forward to what you do with the world over the coming years. And moving forward, just remember to give all literature a chance. Over the next couple years, as you move into World Lit and American Lit, you're going to find some texts. You're going to read some texts that you don't enjoy. But don't forget you are going to read some that you do as well. So never shut the door on literature. Try to read for fun. And I have a slide with that coming up. I'll just go straight to it. Here's a couple of my recommendations if you want to do some reading for fun over the summer. This is just a short list I came up with today. I'm talking to some other English teachers and looking at their lists. And you can flip back to this and pause here if you want to write some of these down. But this is some books that I've loved for a long time and some books that I've just read over the last month. So if you want my recommendations. And I'm just going to end here with a little snapshot of one of the most recent books that I read. This is the title of the book right here. Really powerful book, really short. You can read it in about 15 minutes. And I'm just going to leave you with this quote. So thanks again, guys. It's been a really amazing year. You guys have been so much fun, and I'm really, really sad I didn't get to spend more time with you in the classroom, but you've continued to impress me from afar, and just want to say a little goodbye and tell you guys that it's been great. Have a great summer. Take care.